afternoon and welcome to Markets Today. I'm your host, Mbithe Mwema. It's Tuesday, the 24th of November, a very quiet day in the financial markets in Kenya at the very least. Today, I will be giving you an overview of what was happening yesterday on the NSE. When it comes to our discourse over the show, we will be taking a topical look at the macro events that will be defining Kenya's economic output, or at least the budget-making process that is about to start off this particular week, when the government of Kenya, through the Cabinet Secretary of Treasury, will from tomorrow start looking and taking on public hearings to hear the opinions of Kenyans when it comes to the 12-month-long process of making the budget. A little bit more about that later on in the show. But for now, let's take a look at what was happening on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Every Monday and Friday in any given week is typically a slow start to the week. The only exception for the NSE is that last week we did see a huge jump in terms of turnover. Now, coming to the beginning of the week, that's Monday yesterday, turnover dropped to, it was down 47 percentage points to 480 million in terms of the worth of turnover that was traded. Let's take a look at the indices and the key parameters that we track on a day-to-day basis to understand what the key drivers are, as well as the investor sentiment. First and foremost, we had a slight uptick in terms of the indices. The NSE All Share gained 0.03 percentage points to close the day at 143.75. The NSE 20 share was up 1 percentage point to 1,786 points, whereas the NSE 25 share was up 2.5 percentage points to 3,258.19. Let's take a look at the turnover and what was happening there over the day. We have been tracking the turnover for the beginning of the month to date. You can see there yesterday we did see a drop in terms of the turnover traded. There was a 47% drop to 480 million shillings traded over the day. The uptick that you see there on the chart, that was Friday's turnover, which was 908 million, largely driven by Safaricom. Not too much happened on the blue chips yesterday, and we did see the market correct back to the normal volumes that we have been seeing, about 480 million, give or take. What was the key performance in terms of the drivers for this turnover for the day? Let's take a look at the top movers by virtue of turnover. KCB was the top traded stock with 4.4 million shares traded at an average price of 36.8. The cumulative turnover for this particular stock was 640 million traded over the day. East African breweries saw a bit of foreign interest trading 827,000 shares over the day at an average price of 155 shillings per share. This culminated in a turnover of 496 million over the day. This particular volume for East African breweries was significantly higher than its average traded volume. It has been trading trade-bound at the price of 155 shillings per share. It did touch a low of 152 in this month, but we've seen it come up, and today it is still trading at 155 shillings per share. BOC Kenya saw a good, interesting trade there. 227,800 shares traded at an average price of 370 shillings. Safaricom yesterday remained at 32 shillings per share with 2.2 million shares traded for a cumulative turnover of 71.58 million. Equity Group still trading at the 35.55 mark. 669,500 shares were traded. Let's take a look at the other statistics for the day. We have the top movers by virtual volume. Just quickly, KCB 4 million shares traded, Safaricom 2.2 million shares traded, East African Breweries 827,000 shares traded, Equity Group 669. Earlier, we had said that it was BOC that traded. I beg your pardon for that error. It's actually British American Tobacco that traded 227,000 shares for a price of 370. Let's take a look at the top gainers as well as losers for the day. Cabasid yesterday was the top price gainer. closing up 5.4 percentage points to 8.98 shillings per share. Kabacid announced its half-year results, and these were pretty good numbers. The earnings were up 22 percentage points to 324 million. The sweet spot for Kabacid was this. They have declared a dividend of 0.7 shillings per share, which at the current price gives you a dividend yield of 7.7 percentage points. We've seen it gain yesterday 5.4 percentage points. Today it's also up again. The supply was actually at 9.15, whereas the demand was at 9 shillings per share. 0.7 shillings will be paid to the shareholders who will be on the record, who will be on this particular books later on in January. So for this particular stock, I think we do expect just some upward movement in terms of price. Another interesting element about Kabacid at this point in time is its cash reserves, which tells us that they have declared an interim dividend and there is a possibility of another dividend within the next 6 months. Something to look out for, and if you have been looking for something to invest in terms of the capital upside as well as the dividend yield, then this is something that's coming up our radar at this point in time. Centum, another stock that has been gaining a bit of momentum. Last week it was at 16.5. It has been gaining. It's closed yesterday at 16.8. Today it's still one of the top movers for the day, and it's actually at 17.5. If it gets to the 18 shilling mark, you could have possibly passed up an opportunity for an upside. But if you are looking for a long-term investment, then AIB-AXYS is saying that there is a potential upside of more than 30 shillings on this particular stock. So something you could want to look into for the long term. The only issue when it comes to Centum is what we call the value trap, because investors are just not able to tap into that value, whether they don't understand or whether the business is not as easy to understand or comprehend is another conversation altogether. What we do know is that the current dividend yield, which is the dividend this company pays divided by the price, is at about 5 percentage points. For that kind of yield, we are seeing better returns in stocks such as Safaricom or even other companies. Whereas looking at Centum, you would be asking yourself, can I get better value on the NSE with lesser risk? Because this tends to be one of those high-risk companies in terms of the price movement. Nation Media gained a bit of momentum, up 3.23 percentage points to close the day at 16, and which saw some bit of movement on Diamond Trust Bank, another company we have been tracking. It's now closing at 65 shillings per share, and at this particular price point, it is trading at 0.3 times price to book value. The price to book value is a key parameter for the banking stocks. If it's closer to zero, it means that this bank is quite discounted and a good opportunity to buy for the long term. However, for this particular case, the structural nature of the business of Diamond Trust Bank has actually not been quite attractive to the investors. So for us, we have just been looking at this particular price and trying to do a bit more fundamental analysis to understand what's the sentiment and is there actual value at the price of 65. Let's take a look at who the top losers for the day were. The top losers, East African Portland, down 7 percentage points to 12 shillings. Flametree again down 7 percentage points to 1.3. Olympia Sanlam is also down 5.17, but today in the market it's already recouped a bit of those losses. Scan Group was down 6 shillings to 6 shillings yesterday. We've actually seen it being one of the top gainers today. It's already up to 6.5 shillings per share. This stock has been going down to the level of 6, and then it oscillates back up to 6 to 7, 7.5, and people have been taking profit there. So a bit of upside on this particular stock. That's pretty much what is happening when it comes to the NSE. In as far as the corporate news is concerned, it's been a very slow day in Kenya today. The key news that we expect to drive the week is tomorrow's launch of the public hearings when it comes to the 2020-2021 budget preparation process. By way of preparing for the budget, this takes 12 months where the Cabinet Secretary of the Treasury, which is the Ministry of Finance, begins the process by speaking to the different stakeholders who are part of this particular process. These public hearings, which will run from tomorrow up until the end of the week on Friday, are more or less a part of the way the Constitution has written up the element of accountability so that the public can be able to hear and understand and possibly make some contributions to change. But more or less, whatever is already in the budget statement will more or less carry its own weight up until we read the budget, which is expected to be read on 11th of June in the year 2021. That said, this particular budget making process comes at a time where we have COVID-19. The economic output has reduced significantly, whereas the debt as well as the fiscal expenditure by the government of Kenya has not reduced by a similar amount. In other words, today, from the revenues that the government has collected, already 54% has gone back to servicing debt. Debt continues to be a key issue. But in as much as debt is a key issue, we want to understand the investment case for Kenya. Does this change? Because we are in a space where the government of Kenya has actually reached out to the IMF as well as the World Bank, looking for financing to be able to manage its operations in light of the weaknesses expected in as far as revenue collection is concerned. More specifically, the Treasury has actually reached out to the IMF and the World Bank and will be seeking to get $2.3 billion and $1.5 billion respectively from both institutions. This funding request, if successful, will start to trickle in from the beginning of next year, sometime in January or February. So something to keep tabs on. But that said, when we take a break, we come back and we look at this budget process. What are the numbers looking like? What are the risks? Certainly, for you as an investor, there is the risk of a higher tax base because the government needs to be able to finance its operations. So it's becoming a question of who will be the next person or who will be the next industry that will be taxed by the government of Kenya. We take a short break. When we come back, we will begin to unpack this process and understand where we are at. We will see you after the break, but if you would like to be part of this conversation, our SMS line is 20146. In addition, you can reach out to us. That's at Metropole TV on Facebook or on Twitter or at Mbithe Mwema on the similar platforms. See you after the break.